My mom talks about the fights that she had with
Your
Meri
mom
here and
taught you
there.
to fight? Your mom taught you to fight?
She doesn't talk about every single one of them. She just talks about a couple of them. But I actually remember a lot of the fights or arguments that she would have. I remember there was one in particular that won't get into crazy details about because
Christine Brown and Meri Brown's tenuous relationship has been one of the most discussed sections in this family's long and twisted history. And now, their daughter, Mykelti Pedron, has entered the fray, sharing memories that resonate with the suffering her mother once recorded in her book. She didn't simply echo her mother's voice, she also shared her own experiences, adding new gravitas to what living inside that house was actually like. Mykelti confessed that, even as a child, she always felt different from her siblings. That difference, in her eyes, made her a target for Meri's temper. She explained that she bore the brunt of Meri's frustration more often than most. But to be clear, Meri's wrath wasn't always selective. According to Mykelti, it sometimes spilled over onto other children as well. Still, the sting of being singled out never truly faded. When she reflected on her adolescence, Mykelti spoke of a side of her the show never exposed. On Patreon, she confessed she had been the wild one. In high school, particularly during their Las Vegas stint, she prided herself on being rebellious. She attended parties, sometimes drank too heavily, and frequently tested the limits her family and faith had established. There were evenings when Christine picked her up quietly after she'd had a bit too much to drink. Those sloppy, very human moments never did find their way onto television. But they created an image of a girl who was imaginative, restless, and not willing to fully conform. That rebelliousness, and even her minor acts of insurrection, tended to manifest in what she wore. Mykelti yearned for garments that were more expressive, sometimes less demure than the strict dress codes required. She wasn't alone, however. Maddie, another of the older girls, also yearned for shorter skirts. Though short here merely meant a hemline skimming the knees. Looking back, Mykelti has said it was significant to see her mother write honestly about these struggles. Christine never hesitated to name the tension, nor did she obfuscate the fights that broke out between her and Meri. In her book, Christine recounted a huge argument back in Leahy, a blow-up so bitter she thought it was the breaking point between them. But Mykelti, thinking as a daughter and an observer, refused to say it was one dramatic instant. The battles recurred with repetition. There wasn't one line that was crossed, but a constant buildup of tension that wore away any trust or intimacy that may have been present. Parenting styles were at the center of most of those conflicts. Christine described that she never felt about setting too many rules for her children. She desired them to play, to discover, to laugh without inhibition. If her kids wished to jump on the bed, she allowed them to. If they wished to rattle through the cupboards and play with Tupperware, she did not see anything wrong with it. To her, childhood ought to be free. But Meri? She had a different vision, altogether. Her home, she thought, must be orderly, not disorderly. She wanted discipline. She wanted kids to behave, not run amok. And when Christine's more relaxed approach meant children occasionally acted out, occasionally even cruelly towards the little girls, Meri fumed. To stand by and see chaos erupt with Christine refusing to act left her uneasy, perhaps even resentful. To grasp that tension, it is helpful to put oneself in the shoes of each woman. Imagine Christine, attempting to maintain a sense of happiness in a family already under stress. Imagine also being Meri, having to care for children you didn't birth, but were still supposed to be assisting to raise. Children whose actions sometimes stretched every fiber of your being. And finally, imagine the emotional stakes of rivalry. These were not simply two mothers living in the same community disagreeing over differences in child rearing. They were sister wives, brought together by name, but often torn apart by silent resentments. The children were not simply children. They were also symbols of loyalty, of territory, of where affection and authority really resided. Mykelti's honesty forces us to see just how fragile that dynamic was. For a child, being caught in the crossfire of those rivalries meant never feeling entirely safe. When discipline became harsh, when words cut deep, the scars didn't just fade as the years went by. They hardened into truths she now feels compelled to share as an adult. And yet, there's another layer, one that makes the conflict even more human. Anyone who's ever been a parent knows the instinctive reaction when someone else raises their voice at your child. The protective side roars to life. Don't talk to my kid like that. It doesn't matter if the other adult believes they're right. That line is sacred. Christine felt that, and so did Meri, each in their own way. The conflict within the Brown home was never about rules or Tupperware spills. It was about identity, respect, and the impossible quest to blend together two families under one roof. It was about enemies trying to persuade themselves they were sisters, even when each and every fight reminded them otherwise. And all of it, those wild teenage years, those secret rides home, those arguments behind closed doors, shaped Mykelti's memories. Memories she now brings forward for the world to weigh alongside her mother's words.
Yay!
Go to you, we're off my spot.
Other spot.
Came to you. I like the spot I was in.
You don't get it.
Why not?
Because there's that spot there.
That's my spot.
Hayden picks on the girls sometimes, which I don't know. One side I'm kind of like, oh, that means they're integrating really well because he's treating them like sisters. And that's horrible.
Sibling relationships within the Brown household were seldom easy. Brothers and sisters would tease, quarrel, and at times trespass on boundaries that sliced deeper than friendly sniping. To an outsider, it might appear to be just another large, boisterous household. But within, the repercussions tended to weigh heavier, particularly when discipline, or the absence thereof, was involved. Anyone who is a younger sister understands the pain of being bullied by older brothers or cousins. That combination of being small, exposed, and dismissed as if it were just how boys are. The tired old excuse, boys will be boys, lingered overhead like an uninvited rule of nature. Worse yet, the message that he only bothers you because he likes you depathologized pain as love, requiring girls to bear confusion along with the bruises. On Sister Wives, scenes like this were acted out on television. During a camping episode, there was a boiling point when one of the older boys, Peyton, bullied his little sister Brianna. The older-brother relationship gave the interaction an even more unbalanced feel. At one point, even one of the boys stuck his finger into Brianna's eye. It wasn't jesting, it was bullying. The pain of the little girl was real, and it was acted out in front of the camera crew. It was Meri who intervened at that moment. She screamed at the kids, ordering them to stop. To her, there were no shades of gray. Physical violence was not acceptable, but Christine perceived the confrontation in a different light. She did not feel that a public reprimand was acceptable, not on a family outing, not in front of everyone. In her eyes, Meri had crossed the line. This conflict expressed the essence of their greater struggle. While Christine inclined toward coddling, Meri felt that boundaries needed to be firmly established and right away. To Christine, children required liberty. To Meri, liberty without lines would lead to cruelty taking hold. And if children were hurting each other, either with fists, tongues, or little cruelties, Meri could not remain quiet. The argument resonated because it extended beyond one moment. It posed the larger question, what are the behaviors that can be forgiven and what never should be? Christine had implied kids would outgrow rough edges. Meri responded that there were some acts that couldn't be dismissed as part of a natural stage. Hitting, bullying, belittling, those weren't milestones. They were lessons, learned somewhere, too often demonstrated by the grown-ups themselves. For most who've endured it, the link is indelible. Kids who are raised observing aggression tend to bring it with them into their own relationships, into relationships with siblings, into relationships with friends, even into relationships with eventual spouses. Violence is conditioned, become normal until it sets in as habit. For Meri, intervening swiftly was never a matter of control. It was a matter of interceding before cycles became permanent scars. Nevertheless, the family uncovered another reality. Not all parents discipline equally. Christine's less strict stance drew her children to her. She was the parent of liberty, the one who seldom shouted. Meri, on the other hand, became the parent of regulations, the one who had to act as the bad cop. That imbalance consistently created resentment. Children gravitated towards the permissive parent, leaving the more rigid parent to bear the blame for being harsh or mean. It's not difficult to see the exhaustion in that position. Imagine constantly being the one to say no, the one drawing the hard lines, while another parent silently watches from the sidelines. Over time, it stops being about rules and starts feeling like betrayal. The stricter parent becomes isolated, disliked not only by the kids but sometimes by the other adults in the household too. That's where the nuance emerges. Was Meri's discipline perfect? Number. There are accounts of her crossing lines, of her temper leaving scars, but did that mean every action was rooted in malice? Not necessarily. At times, her interventions came from a deep belief that cruelty among siblings couldn't be brushed aside. For her, respect wasn't optional. A moment from the show illustrates this nuance. Brianna, crying and yelling, informed her parents that Peyton had struck her in the eye. Christine became more irritated, but Meri silenced the commotion. These are your siblings and brothers and sisters, whether you like it or not. You'd better get used to treating them like it. It wasn't only about a single child's tears. It was about the message being handed down in a family already stretched thin. Violence could not become the language of love. This is what created the Brown home so explosive. Two diametrically opposing parenting styles, clashing in the same house, magnified by competition and bitterness. Each woman certain she was doing it the correct way. Each child torn between restriction and liberty, punishment and coddling. And every battle leaving behind one more crack in a family already breaking apart from the burden of too many contrasts. Family gatherings at the Brown home tended to have a subdued undercurrent of chaos. The children, already overburdened by the drama of their lives, misbehaved in ways that only promised the pain simmering beneath their surfaces. And it is hard to blame them. These children weren't merely growing up in a big family. They were growing up on TV, invited to blend with strangers as if love could be created out of whole cloth overnight. Their father had gotten himself a younger wife, and she brought 3 new kids into the family. Immediately, the kids already there were instructed. These are your siblings now. Pretend like it. Love like it. But behind the cameras, past the scripted smiles, there was not much indication that there was integration. Offset, the facade seemed superficial. Christine's book lifted the veil on what her children really felt. They thought they'd once had a present dad, someone who noticed them, who saw them, who cared for them. But once Robyn came along, that presence dissolved. They thought he was hers and her kids. The pain of that reversal was deep. It was not abandonment, it was betrayal, immortalized on video as their father's love was paraded out in front of them but aimed elsewhere. Kids in pain do not sit. They blow up. In a household where parents were torn apart by jealousy, rivalry, and constant tension, the children were the collateral casualties. Blowing up tempers, punches, throwing hurtful words. This was a vocabulary of pain communicated in the place of stability. It's amazing looking back. The amount of energy that went into hating each other, or competing for morsels of Kody's attention. All those hours spent seething could have been better spent caring for their kids. But instead of that, the children grew up surrounded by the kind of tension that made love feel thin, always subject to being withdrawn, and sometimes overwhelmed by argument. It's what makes the tale so heartbreaking. There aren't any victors here. Christine isn't heroic. Meri isn't evil. Both wives, in their own ways, had suffering, frustration, and faults. But the children? They were the ones who suffered most. For children whose minds are still growing, jealousy and neglect don't find expression in introspection. They find expression in battles, tantrums, bullying, a push, a punch, an eye slammed in anger. All of it becomes the outward sign of feelings too vast to be put into words. Peyton, a big kid, was immediately infamous for bullying. Even his sister Gwendolyn would later confess to having thought him abusive. To her, his actions excused him from ever being able to call out Meri, because he himself had inflicted so much damage on the family. Her statements bring out the hypocrisy that entwined their home. Children who hurt others had no qualms about judging adults who did the same. Adults who professed to guard frequently snapped in anger. No one was completely blameless, and everyone bore scars. A lot of the blame leveled against Meri concerned strictness, her brusque manner, her tendency to belittle Christine and her daughter. Mykelti posted on her Patreon that the trauma had built up, not from a single incident but from numerous ones, piled upon one another until she felt too heavy to bear. Following one sharp and biting incident involving money at a candy store, Mykelti finally said to Meri that she wanted no part of her. She was done. They would only exist together as women bound to the same man, not more. Leon was always going to be a part of her life, she added. But Meri. That relationship was over, at least on paper. In practice, Meri lingered in their lives for years, her presence inseparable in communal spaces and family gatherings. For Mykelti, those years only intensified the pain, burying more memories she didn't want to have. Trauma has a way of going underground until much later, and that was something that happened to her. And yet, to understand Meri's perspective is to step into an impossible role. She was the first wife, the one who endured infertility, the one who watched her husband slip further and further from her grasp. She carried not just her own disappointment, but also the frustration of raising children who weren't hers by blood. Then add Kody's constant emotional absence and favoritism, and it's no wonder her behavior often came out sharp, even cruel. None of it pardons for the harm that she did. But it does give us a picture of a woman backed into a corner by situations most would not have had to face. The cruelty, the belittling, the screaming, it perhaps was her shield, her manner of scrabbling for authority in a world where she was systematically losing everything. So, if we consider this family, the contradictions are limitless. Christine was harmed in her own way. Meri attacked in hers. The kids fought, rebelling, and bearing scars that continue to bleed into adulthood. And ultimately, what surfaces most distinctly is that bittersweet truth. Polygamy created no winners, only shattered relationships, shattered identities, and memories the children are still struggling to comprehend. None of that is an excuse, it's just the result of polygamy, a system meant to tie women together in rivalry, having children side by side and seething with resentment toward each other in silence. And if you view the Brown family through that prism, the tragedy is impossible to miss. Christine never wanted Meri around her kids. She felt the pain, she sensed the tension, and she craved space. But repeatedly, poverty pushed her back under the same roof. West Jordan, Lehi. Wherever they relocated, Meri was there, familiarly surrounding her, familiarly surrounding the children. The struggle became unavoidable because option wasn't really there. Christine had been taught, had been conditioned, to assume this was her godly husband, her ordained life. Even when it crushed her soul, she remained. Because to leave wasn't only unimaginable, it was against the rules. Mykelti would later recount it with searing precision. There weren't one or two blows-ups between Christine and Meri. There were several. Fights that rattled the walls. Fights born out of varied notions of motherhood, and out of a rivalry that could never be mollified by enforced sisterhood. Meri, after all, was never the kind to keep her feelings down. She spoke bluntly, at times brutally, refusing to remain sweet in a society that insisted women suffocate their emotions behind an endless smile. That insubordination made her a lightning rod in the system, and it made her children resent her corrections. But the reality cannot be denied. Each woman, each child, each individual locked within that system bore wounds from it. And outside of it, there's hope. Beyond polygamy's walls, all of them have an opportunity to breathe, to live otherwise, to heal. The healing required is vast. Mykelti has acknowledged publicly that she requires therapy. And she's not the only one. Each child that grew up within that home, each of whom was caught in the middle of jealousy, financial struggles, and changing allegiances, ought to be allowed to sort through the trauma that was never asked for. So too should the parents. Christine, Meri, even Kody. No one escaped this unharmed. And yet, despite the depth of the wounds, the cameras did not stop. The family kept filming season after season. Their struggles chopped into plot lines. Their heartbreak transformed into television drama. It's difficult not to perceive it as exploitation. Sure, the show took them out of poverty. It provided them with opportunities they might never have otherwise. But at what price? The children grew up with their most awful moments captured eternally. Their suffering analyzed by outsiders. Christine confessed that none of her children wanted to be on the show. None of them even watch it. But whether or not they ignore it, the footage is there. The internet chatter is there. The talk about them will always hang in the air, impossible to delete. No matter how thick someone's skin may be, how do you actually shut out the world's judgment of your childhood, your family, your most exposed moments? The weight of that information is oppressive, and it gives another dimension of sorrow to the narrative. Because even past the jealousy, past the brawling, past the horror of polygamy itself, the series became another shackle holding them back. Another reason they were unable to get away. Another method their suffering was profited from. And yet, two truths did exist. Meri has her version of events. Undoubtedly, she feels guilt, shame, and frustration about what happened. Christine, likewise, confesses to guilt and remorse. No woman can claim innocence, and no one is beyond pity. They both were ensnared within a system that distorted the very concept of family. The hope now is that freedom can at last yield to healing. That beyond polygamy, they can redefine themselves not as martyrs or competitors, but merely as women attempting to rebuild. And that their children, who suffered the highest price, are able to find the therapy and the peace they deserve. It's tragic to revisit Christine's recollections of poverty. She worked side jobs just to have something on the plate, never knowing where the next meal would be coming from. Some of the children did not even have a bed of their own. Survival was a sacrifice, and sacrifice was remaining attached to a marriage and a family system that further intensified her pain. When you put it all together, the poverty, the abuse, the brawls, the exploitation, the verdict is impossible to avoid. There were no victors. Not Christine, not Meri, not Kody, and definitely not the kids. All that is left is a shattered legacy, one that continues long after the cameras went dark. Now, as each member of the Brown family steps into life beyond polygamy, the question becomes, will they heal? Will they forgive? Will they face the past honestly enough to finally lay it down? Because for all the battles, all the wounds, all the shattered vows, one thing shines through the brightest. The kids deserved better. And maybe, telling their stories now, saying the hurt aloud, they'll finally start to find it.